Hi, my name's Damian Farrow. I'm a professor in skill acquisition at Victoria University and the Australian Institute of Sport. I've been in that role for over 5 years, and before that I had a 10-year stint at the AIS working in skill acquisition. I'm also a father of 2 young girls, 10 and 8, who are heavily involved in junior sport. Yeah, it's a difficult question, James. I think my experience would say that it's hard to know exactly whether our population is declining in physical skills. The evidence would say it is, so experimental evidence, yes. My personal experience as a parent, I see kids that are very capable, but I also see children that are very incapable. But because as a parent you're in a sporting context where you're seeing those that are active, so you're not necessarily seeing the participants that aren't very skillful. But if you go into a school setting, you clearly see that there's this large group of children that aren't even engaging in sport, and they're the ones that are quite poorly skilled, not surprisingly. And then that stacks up quite closely with the evidence that we're aware of in the skill learning, movement skill, physical literacy literature, which clearly highlights that over the last 20 or 30 years there is a decline in our children's motor skill capabilities. To me, the way to reverse the trend of declining skill is there's 2 things to me. The first stems back to family and the parents' attitude towards activity. So if the parents aren't at all interested in it, it's not surprising that their children grow up in an environment where there's no impetus for them to get physically active and skilled. So therefore we really need to educate parents and get them involved, and in turn their children. So playing with their children in their backyard, encouraging them to enrol in junior sport programs, etc., etc. So it's almost a behaviour change of parents' attitudes towards physical activity, which will then in turn positively influence the children. And then coupled to that, that's obviously a major part of your life as a child, is your family. The other major part is school, and that's where we need quality physical education so that they're getting good foundational instruction on how to move well and how to perform the various skills that they need. Key things that we see in our research, James, is that we interview elite athletes about their experiences as children. And time again we get all these wonderful stories about how they grew up playing in the backyard, competing against their brother or sister, or kids up the street, cricket match on the street, or going down to the local park to play 2-on-2 footy or basketball or whatever it is. So these stories, while they're all different, but they all have the common element of it's something that's self-initiated by the child at the time. There's a mix of abilities and skills that are all thrown into the melting pot of backyard sport, and the kids drive that activity, and I think that's really important. It develops an intrinsic motivation and love of sport. And so I think there's many examples. There's books out there, and the titles will escape me, but there's a great one about backyard cricket and growing up in alleyways, learning how to bat on cobblestones and facing balls that are deviating. And it's not surprising that kids that grow up in that environment find a cricket pitch really easy because the road's far more unpredictable. There's great examples of stories such as that. The Johns brothers in rugby league used to soap up the ball before they'd play catch and pass in the backyard. Fantastic examples of what kids are really creative with their sport, and not surprisingly they develop great skills as a consequence. How do you motivate motivate kids that maybe aren't doing it to get out into the backyard. And I was having a conversation with a coach about this, and he's of the belief that up until about the age of 10 or 12, so let's say primary school, the motivation is sort of extrinsic. It's forced on the child through their coaches saying turn up to training, or their parents pushing them out the door and saying go and play in the backyard. And I think that's partly true. And then as a consequence of that, once they're in the environment, they start hopefully to develop an intrinsic motivation or love of the activity for themselves, and then they take themselves out there or get themselves wanting to go to training. How do we get there quicker? Well, I think it's a matter of having an environment that lures them there. Develop talented junior athletes to maybe become national level athletes at a senior age. I think to me there's a set of evidence there now that really supports the idea of generalising and diversifying as a sporting experience in the early years through primary school, and then as you move your way through secondary school you start to specialise a little bit more in the sport that you're showing the greatest interest and potential in. And I think that's socially, psychologically, physically, etc., that's the model that's going to probably serve us most effectively in developing talent. That's not to say there are sports where an earlier specialised focus seems to be necessary, and gymnastics is probably the obvious example there. So we're going to have to accept that if the child wants to be an elite gymnast, they will specialise earlier. But if you want to be an elite tennis player, swimmer, footballer, you have time on your side to experience a diverse range of sports, which helps you become more movement literate, and then that in turn will actually help you when you start to specialise in the chosen sport. Yeah, we have two games that seem to get a lot of attention. One is what we'd call piggy in the middle, so keepings off plus adding in a netball shot at goal. So we play a lot of keepings off games that involve then shooting, and that could be, at the moment it's netball season, but it could involve a football, it could involve any other ball. So running around playing keepings off, bottom line, is probably our number one activity. And then these obstacle courses keep coming up time and time again, and it's no normal obstacle course. It might be a couple of hurdles, then you have to pick up a cricket bat and do a shadow cricket bat swing. You put that down, you get to another cricket bat laying on the ground, but now you've got to do a handstand, and then you've finished that one, you've got to get to the end, and then you've got to sprint and bounce off the trampoline, and then you've got to run back round to the start. So they make up a different course every day of the week, and they'd love to see us race them on those activities. So they're probably